guys, welcome to this week's Sound Like episode, which is on LA beatmaker or music producer TOKiMONSTA. I'm just going to spend the first 2 to 3 minutes of this video talking about why and how exactly I'm changing this series around slightly. So if you're not interested in that, if you want to skip over that, I'll put an annotation around here somewhere that you can just click and it will take you straight into the tutorial. But for those that are interested and want to know how I'm changing it, I'm going to be changing the format of the Sound Like series just very slightly. So rather than having 2 videos per artist, there was going to just be 1 from now on per artist. And secondly, instead of composing a track in the style of the featured artist, I'm going to be actually recreating one of their already kind of released records. So my reason for actually making these changes, firstly, is because that on some of my older videos, the Flying Lotus and the J Dilla, YouTube have been continually flagging these videos for copyright, as obviously I've been playing, Flying Lotus's and J Dilla's records. Now, even though I've just been playing their records purely for demonstration purposes or for educational purposes, apparently this is still not allowed. Secondly, I really dislike being forced into kind of like a creative box or a set of decisions in order to copy or emulate someone else's sound. So what I mean by that is, when I started to create a track in the style of TOKiMONSTA, my hand was kind of being forced almost, as the decisions that I make as a music producer for my own records, I was having to change, and I was having to kind of tell myself that, no, I can't do this, I've got to do it this way, or I've got to do this and not this. So it was kind of a really uncreative process for me, and I didn't feel like it was something I wanted to both continue doing, and also it wasn't something that I was also kind of comfortable doing as well, and I just didn't enjoy copying someone else's sound. But this is where the kind of anti-paradox comes in, because I feel like actually trying to copy a track is, a different story almost. Just bear with me for a second, I'll explain why. I feel like copying a track is a different story because the creative element of music production is drawn out. With copying a record, you're kind of using their creative ideas, you're taking the melody, you're taking the bass line, you're taking the drum pattern, and you're basically then just trying to get that to sound like the original record. And it's drawn out the creative element, and it's just leaving the technical questions, such as how do I get that sound, or how do I get this to sound like the original, for example. It's focusing on the technical knowledge of music production as opposed to the creative element. Also, in this case, actually through emulating a TOKiMONSTA track, I've learned so much about how she produces her tracks. Some of the effects she uses and her general kind of mixing approach or her mixing style. So much more than just simply what you would learn from just, listening to a record. Actually copying a record, I feel you learn so much more about the kind of artist characteristics or their kind of, sound or style as much, as opposed to just creating a record that simply sounds like them. So I feel like this is going to both benefit myself and benefit, the people, you guys who are watching my videos. You're going to get a lot more out of it, as I've actually made the tracks to basically sound or to copy or to emulate an existing record. So you can listen to my version, you can listen to the original, and you can decide for yourself how close it is and how close the techniques I'm teaching you are actually getting you towards the finished product. So yeah, that was all I wanted to say on that. I don't know how long that's taken up, but probably a few minutes. So I want to get straight into the tutorial now. The track in question, or the track that I've used for this example tutorial, is Gamble by TOKiMONSTA, which was on her Midnight Menu album, I believe. I think it was her first album. Definitely my favourite album from her. Now, if you already know the track, you'll know that I've kind of cheated almost. Well, maybe not actually, because the main musical element in the track is actually sampled from an old 80s soul record. So the first thing I want to get into, or probably the most sensible thing to do, would be to play you my version of Gamble. Now, I can't play TOKiMONSTA's version. I did send a test video up to YouTube, or put a test video on YouTube, and it was flagging it for copyright. Now, this is kind of annoying because it kind of disrupts the, flow of the tutorial, but the only thing I can recommend to do is I will put a link to it or an annotation to TOKiMONSTA's version. Just have it open in another tab. Listen to it before you watch the tutorial, or go and listen to it right now, pause this and go and listen to it. I've only recreated kind of, 18 bars or 16 bars, I should say, sorry, of the record, but it's still good to know what the original sounds like so you can hear if you think mine is close or not. But I'll play mine just so you can hear what I've got. I did make this in 4 hours. I tried to set myself a deadline of 4 hours, so it's not going to sound as good as TOKiMONSTA's because she spent a lot longer on it. It's going to have been professionally mixed and mastered, but I think it's pretty close. So let's get into it. So yeah, I personally don't think that's too far off. It's pretty close rendition. It gets the kind of main gist of the track down, and I think I've included most of the instruments in there. So the first thing I wanted to start with is the actual sample that I've took from this track. Now, when I sample personally in my own kind of vanity records, I always fit the drum groove around the sample. So I always start with the sample first, as opposed to starting with the drums, which I know a lot of producers do. A lot of producers also start with the drum groove and fit a sample to that, but that doesn't quite work for me. It's just what works for you really, but I feel like fitting the drum groove around the sample makes a lot more sense. So if you're not familiar with Ableton, time stretching or time correction is known as warping. So when I say warp, I simply just mean time stretch. The first thing you want to do when you get the sample is warp it to the correct tempo that you wish to work at. So in this case it was 88 beats per minute, which is the tempo of the original record. So I'll play the sample for you now. Hopefully YouTube won't flag this as copyright. If it does, then I may have to put a strip of silence here, which would be quite annoying. So this is the original sample, as is, straight from the record. So as you can hear, a pretty dope sample. It is from the track, it's called Flashback, I think it is by, who's it by? I think her name is D Sharp Gamble, if I'm correct, not sure. I'll put a link to it in the description anyway, but that's the sample of the original tempo. The original tempo was 70 beats per minute, so I've increased the speed 18 beats per minute, and then this is the main chop of the sample. So this is how, so you've heard the starting point, this is the main sample as is in the recreation of the track. And then these bits of silence at the end, which you can see here, I've took another chop out of it. In the original, which I can't play for copyright reasons, which is very annoying, but I will put a link into the description, so when you are watching this, just have a link to TOKiMONSTA's Gamble open in a separate tab just so you can flick between it. So in the original, TOKiMONSTA has a little section here that is repeated or is chopped out from the start of the record, which basically acts as, I don't know, almost a fill into the second 8 bars. So I'll just play it with that. So you can hear it just fills in the gap there. It's a little bit quicker. I kept the, I think I pitched it up actually if I click on Ableton. Yeah, I pitched it up 4 semitones. It's not exactly in the same pitch as TOKiMONSTA's. TOKiMONSTA's is slightly higher, I think, if I can remember rightly. I couldn't get it exactly spot on, which was kind of annoying, but it's as close as I can get it. I'm not 100% sure what TOKiMONSTA has done to it, but yeah, it's fairly close. If I get straight into the effects of this, be a good place to start. Utility in Ableton is simply turning the track up by 6 dB, nothing really that exciting. I've then put solid EQ on it, which is part of the Naked Instruments complete package. So I'm just rolling off most of the high end with that, like the original. If you listen to the original, you'll notice that the sample is missing a considerable amount of its high frequency content. TOKiMONSTA may have done this to make it sound like it was coming from tape, vinyl, who knows. It sounds nice and it fits well in the record, so that was another little trick that I got from TOKiMONSTA, that she usually rolls quite a lot of high end off at most of her samples. This EQ here, this was just done to make it sound the original. There's nothing more I can really say. I was just listening to the original, listening to mine, I'm playing around the EQ, trying to get it sounding, pretty close. Obviously I can play it before and after just so you can hear the 2 different versions. So first I'll play it before. Makes it sound a lot thinner, takes out a bit of its body. Again, nothing too interesting. This is perhaps where it ggets a little bit more interesting. So, Effectrix. This is a pretty dope plugin. I've not used it for a while, to be honest, but as soon as I heard TOKiMONSTA's rendition of this sample, I was like, I had to go straight to it and pull it out because I knew it could do exactly what I wanted it to do. Now with this, I was just simply flicking through the presets. You can see this one, I'm not going to try and pronounce that. Some kind of French preset, I'm guessing. Basically, it's got 14 different effects that you can apply to records, and it basically acts as like a step sequencer. So if I play the sample, you'll see this bar will start moving across. And when it passes over one of these blocks, it triggers the effect. This one you can see here says reverse. So when this bar, or time ahead, whatever you want to call it, passes over the bar, it triggers that effect. It's basically like step sequencing effects, which is, I don't know if it's a new concept, but it's something that's perhaps been forgotten. Now, the master mix is kind of interesting as well, because all these effects are then sent to a master level and a master mix. Now, what the master mix does is basically, it's like a dry-wet control, which you can see here, it says dry and wet. Now, you've probably seen the dry-wet control and reverb. It basically is a mix between the dry signal, so the signal without any effects, and the wet signal, which is the signal with the effects on. In this case, if I had it turned up 100% wet, I'll then play it. You can hear that when the sample is playing and it goes over one of the effects and the effect is triggered, you can't hear any of the original sample. So when, for example, it's reversed, the whole sample is being reversed, you can't hear any of the original sample underneath of it. That was a little bit too apparent for my liking, should I say. So I had it around, I don't know, maybe 60 or 70%. This just allowed me to keep the original sample underneath while having the kind of affected sample over the top almost. So the effects aren't quite as sharp, they're a little bit kind of more, I don't know, blunted or more dulled, which, again, I was copying the original record, so it's just the effects that TOKiMONSTA had applied. Now, if you've listened to any TOKiMONSTA records, any Flying Lotus records, any Brain Freeder records in general, you'll notice that there's so much kind of effects and like, I don't know, almost glitchiness that's being applied to the samples, the drum, over the whole track almost. Effectrix could be the plugin they're using. If it's not, it doesn't really matter because you can still get the same effects out of Effectrix as they are using. As you can see, there's 14 different effects you can use, and you can sequence them like a step sequencer, and each effect has its own control as well. You've got a different set of parameters for each effect, but you've always got your attack, release, and your mix. So you can actually, if you wanted to keep the master mix on 100%, but you didn't like the reverse, you thought the reverse was perhaps a bit too loud or a bit too sharp, you could simply just turn the mix down just reverse, so it wouldn't be affecting the rest of the effects. Again, quite a nice little feature. I'm not sure how much this plugin is. I think it's relatively cheap. It's definitely a no-brainer when you're trying to make this kind of music. It really is a necessary plugin for your toolbox, I feel. I've got an Ableton compressor. Now what this is doing is basically sidechaining the sample to the drum groove. So I'll play the sample. I'll just exaggerate the sidechaining. You might notice that when this bar jumps down, it's not exactly in time with the audio. That's because I've had to turn my buffer size up. You can see Ableton's CPU is on 56% or it's around 50. I don't know why. My computer's got 16 gigs of RAM in. I don't know why, but Ableton seems to eat up the RAM. If anyone knows how to get around this, please tell me, because it's something I've been kind of suffering with for a while. The only instrument I've got out here is Machine. That's for the drums, and you can see here nothing's playing. It's on 54%, and there's like, what, 10 channels, and I've got no other applications open on my computer besides ScreenFlow, which I'm using to record this tutorial. So I don't know, but that's why it's not quite in time. But when this is ducking, it's when the drums are hitting. It's basically ducking the sample out of the way from the drums. Now, I've spoken about sidechain in depth in, I think, all my videos. Sidechain is a massive kind of effect that TOKiMONSTA uses, Flying Lotus is using, J Dilla used. Sidechaining is something you need to master the art of. You truly do, because I think the primary kind of function of sidechaining, or when it was first introduced, was simply for cleaning up a mix, or for, you know, ducking things out of the way of other instruments, which is in some instance what I'm using it for in this. But I'm using it more, obviously I'm copying TOKiMONSTA's record, but I'm using it more for the effect that it gives on the sample rather than anything else, because it just makes the sample obviously sit better in the mix, and it makes the drums sit a bit better in the mix, but it also kind of feels like you get the bobbing up and down effect. So the sample's kind of like entwined almost like within the record, and it's kind of jumping up and down. And I don't know, it just kind of fits in the record a bit more to my ears, I feel. So that's why I'm using that. And then I'm then using this on this channel. I can find it. Not that one. I should be using it, but it's turned off. for some strange reason, but simply I was using this just to pitch down the end of the sample, which is when the other one pops in. Got the main sample, and then for the last kind of few seconds, you've got this little one that pops in. When this one pops in, the main one drops in pitch, and it also drops in volume, which is still there. The pitcher's, for whatever reason, decided that he doesn't want to be on the channel anymore, so we'll just leave that be. But in the original record, you can hear ever so slightly that TOKiMONSTA is pitching down the end of the main loop. I also felt that the pitching was a little bit too apparent in my version, so I decided that I wanted to drop the volume in it as well, just to make it a bit, kind of soften it up a bit. So let's play the sample again in full. So in regards to the sample, I also just wanted to point out that it has been I know I mentioned it briefly at the start. I have warped this sample, if I can go on it. You can see here, these little yellow arrows are the warp markers. Now, if you're not familiar with Ableton, as I said, warping just means time stretching. These little markers are simply, you'd place these markers on the point of the place you like to warp. So if you warp in a drum track, you'd put a warp marker on each beat, and you can then drag it around and drop it in the place you like. So when I first heard this sample, I thought it might be a little bit tricky to warp, but I managed to do it via listening to TOKiMONSTA's, which helped massively because I could hear where she'd obviously placed her warp markers. She actually used Ableton also, so it might be interesting if you are trying to recreate something similar to her sound. Maybe try and experiment with Ableton and the time stretching Ableton, because it just offers some amazing, probably the best of any DAW when it comes to time stretching features, and it really is simple and easy to do. Yeah, so I was just checking. So I warped to the guitar in this track. So as you can hear, there's a kind of guitar playing with the Rhodes. And you'll notice that when this goes up on YouTube, well, it is slightly now actually, that this beat here, it kind of sounds like it's playing here. Sounds like it's playing at there, which it is that beat, but the reason it's slightly behind is because, like I just said, I had to increase my buffer size, so hopefully that isn't confusing you. I warped the guitar to each beat of the track, so each kind of pluck, or the main kind of, I don't know, start or end of the main kind of start actually of each bar of guitar, I warped to the first bar of Ableton. It's kind of, it takes a little bit of practice time stretching, and it can get tricky when you're kind of playing with a sample that can be hard to warp, as the instruments don't have, a regular beat or kind of rhythm to them. Just playing around in Ableton and listening out from the melody, you can kind of break it into sections, and then once you've got the sections, you can kind of then start putting it into the correct bars. Once it was sounding good to my ears, I checked it with the metronome, to check it was in time. Once I got it in time, and once it was kind of warped correctly to the beat, I then pitched up 4 semitones and 49 cents or whatever to match TOKiMONSTA's rendition. As I said, it's not exactly the same, but it's pretty damn close. So that's kind of as much as I wanted to say on the sample. I do have a machine studio that I do also do most of my samples in, but for this demonstration purpose, I've decided to do it in Ableton because a lot of people don't use Machine or don't have a machine, so they're not going to probably be using the software. It's a little bit trickier to do in Machine. It's obviously easier to do with the controller, but it's a bit tricky to do just with the software alone. So I thought doing it in Ableton, it would be a bit easier to get across to you. I've done all my tutorials besides a couple in Ableton up to yet, and it seems to be going down okay. And Ableton kind of, it shows things in kind of a nice simple manner, so it's easy to apply to all the DAWs, I feel. So that's them out of the way. The next thing, so I did do the drums in Machine, but the drums aren't anywhere near as complex, so I don't want to speak anywhere near as much about the drums as I did about the sample. So these are the drums on their own. Nice bit of lag there. So with TOKiMONSTA, or with any brain feeder artist really, in fact a lot of kind of Los Angeles beat makers or music producers, I don't know which one to classify them as because they kind of call themselves both, so they like the offbeat patterns, which is quite interesting really. With varying the velocity and creating, you know, ghost notes or different drum hits, you can kind of get something quite close to their beats. So I sequenced the drums in Machine, as you can see here. I set my Machine Studio into step sequence mode and kept kind of, you know, tapping on the pads and messing around until I had the pattern pretty close or perfect. I think it's pretty close. I'm not sure if it's perfect. I'm not going to call it perfect, but it's quite close. So the top one, so each one of these orange blocks is a kick drum. You can see nothing too special about them. With the velocity, the kind of that kick drum you can hear that kind of sounds like it's wobbling almost, that is done with the velocity. So you put the velocity of that kick drum down maybe half or more than the rest of the kick drums, and it just creates that kind of offbeat or almost a ghost note feel to the beat. Now this is something TOKiMONSTA, or I've noticed in a lot of TOKiMONSTA tracks, she likes to experiment with. So rather than using a different kick drum, they use the same kick drum, or she uses the same kick drum in fact, and plonks the velocity down, I don't know, 50% of the normal kick drums. Although it's so simple, it gives a really nice groove and feel to the drums, because having all the drums velocities at 100%, the rhythm gets really kind of repetitive and boring after a few bars of it. So playing with the velocity and experimenting with that is critical to getting your drums close to that of a TOKiMONSTA record. And the clap is nothing too special, it's just a simple clap hitting on the second and the fourth beat at the bar. You can see the names of the samples there. I'm not sure where they're from, but I'm sure you could find them. I think they're from Samplephonics pack. I've been using the Samplephonics packs for the last few months. Shout out to Samplephonics. Please sponsor my videos. I love your stuff. Back into the drums. So yeah, the singles on Machine. I then rolled off. If you listen to the original TOKiMONSTA track, you'll notice that especially on the clap actually, that it sounds very kind of distant and was recorded really far away from the microphone. This is achieved through just pulling down the high end, just taking off some of the high end. So if I bypass it before and after, give you a little kind of feel to what it sounded like. It also pushes the drum groove to the back of the mix. So if you don't know about creating space in a mix, rolling off the high end and the low end actually will push things to the back of your mix, and obviously reverb. So on your reverb send, it might be a good idea to roll off the top and the bottom end. It also cleans up your reverb, but it also creates a kind of a big depth in your mix, and it throws the kind of sound, or it throws the reverb right to the back of the mix. And as I said, it can create a real nice depth to the mix. So again, something worth playing around with. And then finally, this should be a compressor. Yeah, nothing amazing, I guess. I mean, preset big smack. I feel that's taken off way too much than it should be. I usually aim for around -6 that it's kind of reducing, and the thing I like about the Pro C is you can actually see kind of a visual representation of how much it's reducing the signal by. So watch in this little section up here. You can actually see how much it's reducing the signal by, which is, I think, is really nice, especially if you're new to compression and you're trying to learn the topic. So that might be something to experiment with actually, plugins. So simple enough drum groove. So just a quick recap. The secret is experiment with velocity and also swing on drums. Swing is critical. I didn't actually show you, but on the Machine, the global parameter setting was set to 50% swing. Play with velocity and play with swing and you'll get nice offbeat rhythms. Next, I guess, see there's no bass in this one actually. The bass comes from the original record, or the original sample I should say, which you could call me lazy for, but I did only make this in 4 hours. But with any TOKiMONSTA record, I'd imagine a sub bass will be done on something like Massive. I've watched a few of kind of the interviews with her, and I know she uses Absinthe 5 by Native Instruments for a lot of kind of synth sounds. So if you want to sound like TOKiMONSTA, have a little play with Absinthe. I think she also owns a Moog as well, so some of her sounds may come straight from that. But yeah, other than that, I think the main interesting things, or things you might have picked up on, is possibly the white noise. Why has he got a block of white noise in the record? This is, I don't know, this might come as a surprise to some people, but white noise is actually quite a big secret in the music production industry, I should say. Well, maybe it's not a secret, and if it is, I'm revealing it to you, so you heard it here first, folks. Now, a lot of people use white noise to thicken up their records. I used it in this instance to thicken up the record because I was kind of strapped for time, so I whacked it in there just to make the record sound a little bit thicker than it was. So if I play it on its own, I don't want it to blow your ears off. It's not too bad. I'll play in the record now. not sure how well it's translating through the speakers, but you might be noticing it as well because I played it on its own first, which could have been a mistake. But basically, you stick a block of white noise into your record and you turn it down and you take the high end off it. So there you go. Well, the high and low, so you kind of bandpass it really. Move all the high end, all the low end. 100 to 1K. I've also sidechained it to the drums so it's not getting in the way of the drums, and I've also used the Effectrix. Yeah, the same presets I used on the sample. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of vibing with the sample. It's kind of moving with the sample. It's not just a static block of white noise, because then it would stand out too much. The funny thing about this is there is an actual, it's got a word for it, and I can't think, the word escapes me what it's called. It's an actual kind of audio perception trick. Now, because I've played this white noise to you on its own, you're going to be noticing it, but when you hear a record from your favourite artist or favourite producer, you won't be hearing the white noise soloed first. So it's going to be in the track, but you won't notice it. But you would notice it if it was taken out. So if I play it again, and then I take it out, you'll notice it being not there. And it's a real easy way to thicken up your track. Now I used this and it sounded alright and it fitted, it kind of kept in line with the original, so I was happy to keep it in. I then got a crackle, quite a kind of basic, or I don't know, maybe an obvious thing that TOKiMONSTA uses. Flying Lotus uses loads of them, so did Dilla. Well, Dilla's are mostly real crackles, and a lot of Flying Lotus and TOKiMONSTA's mic, but this is, well, it's not an artificial one. It did come off a vinyl record, but it's not actually in the original record. Just been high passed as well. Just adds a little bit of dirtiness to the record. Yes, percussion I've also got. Solo them quickly for you. Now, if you listen to the original record, you can hear that there are some bongo drums quite prominent in the record. So I wanted to recreate this, so I got a bongo loop from, again, a Sample Phonics pack. 89 beats per minute Latin time, yeah, Sample Phonics pack. I'm sure you can find that, I'm not sure which pack. So yeah, so I chopped the bongos. I'm not actually sure I did chop the bongos up. I think I might have. I know they look chopped up, but I'm not sure if I kept them the same. I might have kept them the same as the original. But regardless, I added some bongos in there to try and recreate the original effect that TOKiMONSTA created in her track. Again, it's not exactly the same, it's similar. I also felt like her bongos were panned very slightly to the right, so I then did this with mine. I also panned the tambourines, or whatever this is. Yeah, I also panned the tambourines to the left and this to the right, which is just some kind of wooden shaker effect. Altogether, sounds like this. You might notice I've got a submix. If you don't know what a submix is, it's kind of critical if you're using reference tracks, which you should be. I did recommend to use reference tracks in one of my previous videos. With the submix, all of these sounds here are being sent to a submix, which is basically just acting as a kind of master output, but just for the sounds that I'm creating in Ableton. The original TOKiMONSTA track I've got up here and the original sample are going to the master output down here, so they go in from there straight to the master out, and then all my instruments and effects, all my sounds in the project are going to the submix and then to the master out. Now you can see my submix down here. I've done some kind of quick mastering, I should say, or quote unquote mastering. I don't want to call it mastering, it's some leveling, let's say. So basically this means that the original track isn't going through my mastering chain. It's skipping that and going straight to the master. And obviously if that was going to my mastering chain, it's going to have all my effects on it, and it's going to make the original track sound really nasty because it's already been mastered. So I was comparing my sounds to that of TOKiMONSTA's, and I didn't want to hear all my mastering work on her track. That would just be ridiculous because it wouldn't be the original record. So that's why I was using the submix. This isn't the mastering chain that I do use normally. Some of the plugins are the same. I do use the PSP Old Timer and I do use the the BX control and sometimes the PSP plugin. Now, I've used Ozone. Again, I made this track quickly. This is basically in the bulk of the mastering, tape shaping, bang. I'm not going to say I recommend using this, but it's definitely better than using nothing. If you don't have the money to pay for mastering, or if you don't know much about mastering yourself, you can stick Ozone isotope on there. It's fine, it does do the job. I wouldn't recommend using it as a kind of a one-stop solution almost, you know, for all your records. It's good as a one-stop solution for some, but I would recommend paying or learning more about mastering yourself, because it is a dark art and isotope won't get it sounding anywhere as good as a professional mastering engineer will. And that is the track in a nutshell. So you can literally see 6 channels makes up a TOKiMONSTA track. I'm not calling her music simple because it's not, it's incredible. There's probably a lot more in her records that I missed out, but I'm trying to demonstrate how, not simple, but how little makes up great music. You know, great tracks are usually not a lot goes into them. Some of the best records out there are incredibly simplistic, and that is always the way you want to be trying to make music. Keep it simple, don't overcomplicate things, you know, just slap on what you need and get the job done. You can get kind of bogged down in the technical stuff, but just make sure you learn the basics: EQ, compression, reverb, you learn about stereo imaging, you have a quick look at mastering, and you have a quick look at some of the things I've mentioned in this tutorial. Go and do some triangulation, do some follow-up research, and come to your own decision. But I hope this has helped to at least lay the foundation of TOKiMONSTA record, and I hope that you've learned a little something from this tutorial. So thanks again. I'm going to be back doing a video every week from now on. I had a little break over Christmas, spent a bit of time with the family, perhaps got a little lazy, who knows. I'm going to be back doing one a week. I'm going to try and do them on Sundays. I'll get it uploaded for Sunday. I usually record the video on a Friday and then put it on the Sunday. Next week, I might be doing a tutorial on Madlib. I've also had a couple of suggestions, one on a producer called Knowledge and one on another one whose name escapes me. But I have had 2 suggestions so far, which are, you know, dope. Thanks for your suggestions. I will be putting a tutorial together around them. I just want to be careful I'm not doing too many brain feeder artists, because to me, they all have their own sound, but the effects they're using, the techniques they're using are very, very similar. So there's not I don't want to make kind of the same tutorial and just regurgitate it, you know, with different artists. I want to be, you know, make sure I'm doing quite different artists. One on Madlib next week, and then we'll see where we go from there. Thanks again for coming back, and thanks so much for the support. Almost on 300 subscribers now as of the 10th of January when I'm recording this. I really appreciate all the support and all the love you're showing me. The channel is really starting to build up some steam now. I just want to keep building on that and keep getting the videos uploaded. So thanks again, guys, and I'll see you next week. Peace.